Great. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for coming to our third Leadership Forum. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our guest and keynote today, Gordon Cairns. And is also a very warm welcome to all of you, our esteemed industry leaders. And it's always a pleasure to meet, discuss, and debate kind of the state of our industry. So today's topic is gender diversity. It is difficult to ignore in today's business media, and it's an issue that's increasingly discussed and debated, and yet the gains have been slow. In 2012, women represented only 13.7% of the ASX 200 directorships. In our industry, it is not dissimilar in terms of the gender gap. Based on our annual salary survey, our overall gender mix is balanced, with females representing just under 50% of all agencies' employees, but only 23.7% of top management roles are held by women. And females account for only 15% of all agency CEOs, managing director, and chairman positions. 2 years ago, the Communications Council set up the Gender Diversity Group. It is championed by an ambitious group of our industry leaders who understand the commercial imperative for change and are committed to closing the gender gap. We've undertaken both qualitative and quantitative research, and this has informed the development of a robust strategy to create action on this issue. So I'd like to welcome, first up, Alex Allwood, who's the chair of our Gender Diversity Group, and to the stage, and to share the group's findings and also strategy for action.
Good morning from me, and I just wanted to start off by thanking Margaret for the introduction. Myself and Lorraine Djokovic founded the Gender Diversity Group about 2 years ago in conjunction with the Communications Council. We formed it on the back of our friends and our colleagues exiting the industry and going either client side or going into different categories, because the working conditions were a little bit more balanced for what they wanted to achieve in their own careers. And over the last couple of years, we've been working on creating change for the advertising industry in terms of gender diversity. Our purpose is to promote the advancement of women in the marketing and communications industry, with a view to addressing the issue of gender imbalance. Would help if I put a slide up. There you go. In the belief that gender diversity in business translates to tangible economic benefits, an essential condition for businesses in commercial creativity. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all the industry leaders that have championed the issue over the last 2 years. Our group is a voluntary group, and many people have lent their time, energy and resources to help us achieve what we've achieved over the last couple of years. So thank you very much, and a couple of them are here today. So just have a look at our approach over the last couple of years. We've undertaken desk research, qualitative research with employers, quantitative research with employees, and also undertook benchmarking interviews. Firstly, with our desk research, we wanted to understand the issues, causes and effects of gender inequality, and so we took a comprehensive review of the white papers and research from Bain & Company, McKinsey, Male Champions of Change, Chief Executive Women, Workplace Gender Equality Agency, and the Reby Institute. From that, we also undertook the qualitative research. We wanted to understand employers' attitudes towards gender diversity, particularly in relationship to retention and promotion. We undertook quantitative research with employees. We wanted to understand the triggers to retention and barriers to promotion. And then we interviewed leading businesses such as the Commonwealth Bank, Telstra, McDonald's, BT, Pacific Brands and Novartis to understand what they're doing in their businesses. What changes, what policies, what procedures have they put in place to create change? Over the next couple of minutes, I'll just talk to you about some of the key findings from this research. Firstly, both Bain and Company, from the desk research, both Bain and Company and McKinsey cause-related papers broadly conclude that there are two barriers to entry that women face. Firstly, work-life priorities and difference in leadership. And you will see these themes in both our qualitative and quantitative research. The issues are both complex and subtle, and not surprisingly, opinions differ between men and women on what is getting in the way of progression to leadership. Respondents believe that women's competing priorities, or double burden syndrome, which is the combination of domestic responsibilities and work, limit their progress. And I think you'll be all familiar with this if you have a family. You do a day's work, you finish up, you go home, you do the home duties, you help out the kids with their homework, and then you open your laptop at 8:30, 9 o'clock and begin a couple of hours work. And that's what we call the double burden syndrome. The second barrier that McKinsey and Bain found in terms of barrier to entry that women are facing is a difference in leadership style. Simply put, women collaborate more and men promote their points of view more effectively. Looking at our qualitative research with employers, there were four main themes that came out of this. A lack of awareness of the financial benefits of gender diversity, low priority and a lack of understanding of the issues and their consequences. Simply put, they put it in the too hard basket. A general principle in recruiting or promoting, that's the best person for the job. And also there's structural issues with agencies. And we've all encountered this, that clients require or feel that they require 24/7 access to our staff. And this has meant that part-time roles only really offered to non-client facing staff. So that was the outcomes from that qualitative research. In terms of our quantitative research for employees, I'm not going to go through each of the 10 barriers to promotion. I've just picked out some key ones. Number one, women and men have different leadership styles, and you can see that same theme from the McKinsey work. Two, women fall behind in their careers if they take time out for a family. Now these are their beliefs, and that this is their reality. Women are not treated the same way as men. And number seven, the agency environment is too blokey. Now we have a whole body of research on these women's thoughts and feelings on agency environment and agency culture. And if you haven't had the presentation in terms of the research that we've undertaken, please, we're only too happy to talk to you further on these findings. Number 9, the working hours are too long, and number 10, employees don't think of women as having long-term careers. So that's just a few snapshots from that quantitative research, where 500 women were interviewed on an online survey. The key issues that fell out of this research there was basically 3 that were identified. Low awareness of the benefits, and the requirement for change here is getting on the CEO's agenda. Second, culture, flexibility and client demands, and the requirement for change here was shifting culture and creating flexible workplaces. And the third one is gender biases, inclusion, role models and ambitions, and the requirement here is to create leadership opportunities and help women with their career ambitions. From that research, we developed a strategy so that we could address these issues, and we've called them actions to create change. So as you can see, there's our three issues up the top. Getting on the CEO's agenda: culture, flexibility, and client demands, and leadership and career and ambition. And so the strategy to create change was to form what we call our champions of change, and this is a very important initiative because the change must come from the top. And so we've had a number of industry leaders who not only understood the moral imperative to create change, but understands the financial imperative. And we have been very, very lucky to have leadership and very strong leadership and guidance from Gordon Cairns, who's our keynote speaker today, and Margaret will introduce his fantastic work he's done in this space. And what he's done is we've brought together the following CEOs to help us create change. And they are Chris Brown from DDB, Sudeep Gohil from Droga 5, John Stedman, who forms part of our panel, as well as Sudeep, and John Stebbins from Group N, and Mike Cottham from STW. And what they've been doing is they've been undertaking a number of initiatives to start the journey. They've done an audit of their business. They've got under the numbers so they understand the issue. They've set goals and targets. They've formed a diversity council, and they're starting to create change in terms of policy and procedure in the business. So you'll hear more about that when Lorraine Djokovic talks to the panel, and Gordon talks about how he's informed that group. Our second initiative is to create a diversity hub for CEOs. What we want to do here, this site will help CEOs and policy makers access the right information. There's a huge amount of information in the online space, and it becomes quite overwhelming to know where to go to get the right information. So this hub has been set up to give you the right information and the right steps to create change in your businesses. It's set up right now so that you can take those first steps. And the third initiative is to create leadership opportunities and help women with their career ambitions. There was a lot of debate on this one of how we should go ahead. There are a lot of women's groups set up. There are a lot of leadership groups set up, and we didn't want to be just another women's group or leadership group here. And so what we're doing is very much a grassroots approach. We go and talk to women's networking groups. We go and talk to industry groups about what's the state of play and what we're doing to change things. Already in the last 12 months, we've spoken to She Says, we've talked to SWIM, we chaired our own panel at a semi-permanent conference talking about the creativity gap and where are the women in creative, and we've also talked to the Australian Institute of Management. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing and how what journey we've taken. It's been very exciting, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this morning's conference.
So next I'd like to introduce Gordon. In April 2010, the Commissioner for Sexual Discrimination, Elizabeth Broderick, was instrumental in bringing together some of Australia's most influential and diverse male CEOs and chairpersons to form the Male Champions of Change. These chairs and CEOs are from organizations including Westpac, Telstra, IBM, Deloitte, KPMG, Qantas, Woolworths, Goldman Sachs, ANZ, Combank, McKinsey, the ASX, the Chief of Army, Treasury, and the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. The group aims to use their individual and collective influence and commitment to ensure that the issue of women's representation and leadership is elevated on the national business agenda. Our keynote today is Gordon Cairns, who is one of the founding members of this group. Gordon started his career at Nestle, followed by Cadbury, the Imperial Group, and PepsiCo, where he worked for 10 years in 3 continents and across marketing, operations, and finance. He joined Lion Nathan initially as the managing director of the Australian beer business, and then as CEO for the consequent 7 years. During that period, the company was consistently recognized as the best employer, and he was awarded a True Leaders Award on 3 separate occasions. In September 2004, he stepped down from the full-time executive role and served on the board of Westpac, and now also serves as chairman of Origin Energy, David Jones, Quick Service Restaurants, and as a non-executive director of World Education, a microfinance provider. So please welcome Gordon on behalf of the Male Champions of Change.
Thank you very much, Margaret, for that very kind introduction. I got here because I was told to by my secretary, and I always do what I'm told, at 7 o'clock. I walked in and I saw the AHA sign there, and I thought, oh my God, I've come to the wrong place. These guys have come back to haunt me. And then I had a worse nightmare, which is the previous speech I gave was in Hong Kong for the CSFB conference, and I said to them, it was a Friday afternoon, I said to them, how many people are you expecting? And they said somewhere between 500 and 1,000. And so I turned up on the Friday afternoon, and there were 4 people there. 3 of them were from CSFB. And there was one other. So I thought, well, I've prepared this presentation, I may as well give it. And so I started, and the one person who was interested, who'd bothered to turn up, went into his briefcase and got his newspaper out and started to read his newspaper. So I said to him, excuse me. He went, yeah. I said, do you want to hear what I've got to say? He said, no. So I gave an outstanding presentation to myself. Thankfully today we've got some people who are actually interested. Let me start off by, I feel almost embarrassed to say I'm here to promote the case for women as leaders, because it seems to me that we don't have to make the case. There is a moral argument that doesn't need to be made. All of us understand what the moral argument is, but unfortunately there are some people who don't get the moral argument, so we've decided that we actually have to go further than that. Here's what I'm going to talk about. First of all, I am one of the original founders of the Male Champions of Change. The one regret is looking back, we shouldn't have called it the Male Champions of Change. We should have called it the Champions of Change. But the reason we called it the Male Champions of Change was because we have a very strong point of view that men invented the system, men run the system, and the only way the system's going to change is if men actually change the system. And the problem is when you get women talking to women, it goes nowhere. When you get women talking to men, they're accused of whinging. And when you get men talking to men, we actually get some action. So we set up the Male Champions of Change in 2011. As Margaret said, we've got some great organizations on it, and we're committed to improving diversity and being measured on it. Let me give you, even if you accept the moral argument, we need to make the business case. And oh, by the way, I've been told by one of the young ladies in the audience, if I get really boring, I said that my daughter's a yoga teacher, so she said, could you do some yoga instead? So if you see me getting down to do downward dog, you'll know it's getting really boring. The situation in corporate Australia is we're making some change, some progress, but the rate of change is actually glacial. And the danger is we've actually declared victory already, and we've hit the wall. With 14% of female directors on ASX 200 boards, that's nowhere near good enough. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because clearly if you don't have enough people in management, you don't have enough people to get onto boards. Senior managers, 80% of women don't believe they have an equal opportunity. Interestingly, 50% of the men agree with them, but don't do anything about it. Why? Well, it's quite simple. Why would a man who's got a powerful job agree that a woman should be available to do that job? Because they might end up losing their job. The net result is the Net Promoter Score. That's how would I recommend this organization to my friends? Would I recommend the product? the Net Promoter Score for women in these organizations is less than 5%. So they don't actually think it's a great place to work. What's really appalling is 62% of the ASX 200 companies don't have any female senior executives at all. These companies are Neanderthal. The pay gap is alive and well, and unfortunately in the financial services industry, it's actually worse than anywhere else. And there are all kinds of excuses made about why there is such a pay gap, but let me tell you, the usual response is, well, men ask for a pay rise, women don't. Well, I think there's an obligation beyond that. There's also something else called the stupidity curve. You'll probably recognize it from your own organizations. I'm not saying your own organizations are stupid. I'm saying that this is the stupidity curve, which is you start off here with half the talent coming in are male, half the talent are female. In fact, now it's actually there are more females coming in. Even at Origin Energy, where you'd expect it to be a male job because lots of engineers required, there are more women coming in than men, and they're smarter. But then, as you go through to senior executives, what happens is women drop out, and the proportion changes until you get to up here, where the proportions are just terrible. And the observation here is you've got all this wasted talent, and yet all the management consultants, and I sit on the board of McKinsey, all the management consultants are saying there's a war for talent there. The differences between the great organizations and the poor organizations is down to the talent. And yet most organizations are basically only dealing with half the talent pool because the women are actually leaving. So what are what's the key learnings from all of this? Well, the first is we need to. This is not a quick fix. We need to take a strategic approach to this, and we need to figure out what the root causes of the problem are and fix them. I think there are 7 key success factors. What you don't measure, you can't manage, and if you want to manage it, you have to measure it. And not only that, but the good companies are actually setting targets, and they're measuring themselves and going against those targets. And finally, ladies, and I'm going to address the ladies in the audience here, if the guys can just give me a little latitude, I'm also going to make some suggestions as to what women need to do as well, because we can't do it on our own. So what are some of the strategies for change? Well, because I work with McKinsey, I asked them if they could do some research for us, and asked them if they could do it for nothing. And they agreed. So they produced this wonderful piece of work, which is available to everyone. So either from Margaret or the other people who are on your leadership group. And there are 4 phases. And you can. The idea is each company actually that we've talked to says, oh yeah, we're up here, we're at the leading edge. And that's great until we actually say to them, okay, well, let's just look at phase 1. So phase 1 is you get under the numbers. So what are the numbers? You set up a diversity council, and all of a sudden these companies who think they're at phase 3 go, we don't have a diversity council. Then you make it personal. You ensure that women have good skill building in the organization. So you don't say, well, we're not going to invest in the women because they're going to leave. They're going to stop and have babies, so there's no point in giving them any development. You establish great networks as well for the women, because all the networks are the male networks. So the men go to the pub on a Friday night. The men go to the foodie. On Monday morning, they talk about the foodie. And the women are going, so what are the networks for us? And you ensure that the hygiene factors are in place, like measure salary at every level, measure starting salary when graduates join you, to ensure that there's equality. So that's getting in the game, and I have to tell you, nearly every one of the male champions of change companies, after they had reviewed this in detail, said, yeah, we're at phase 1. Okay, phase 2, the leadership team in the organization, so that's the CEO and his direct reports become the Diversity Council. So it actually becomes, if it's not on the CEO's agenda, it will never happen, and it won't be important. It'll just be tokenism. You signal a change with the appointment of women to key roles, and you actually have to actively sponsor that. It won't happen by chance, and the reason it won't happen is, and there's lots of great work that's been done on this, is women are tougher markers on themselves than men. Women never believe they're ready for the job, and men always do. And so when you interview women, they tell you all the reasons why they can't do the job. And when you interview men, they give you all the reasons why they can do the job. And oh, by the way, they expect to be paid more for the job. So you actually have to change that bias. You've got to change from the diversity mass at the second stage, which is percentage of male, percentage of female, to actually say that this is the target that we're going to set ourselves. So Westpac set a target of 50% male, 50% female. You have to put it on the CEO's KPIs, because if it's not there and they don't get rewarded, it'll never happen. It's just tokenism. And then you have to publish it, so it now becomes something that you're accountable for, and then you have to measure against it. In addition to which, if you're at, say, phase 2, you actually have to intervene seriously on talent, and that intervention is when you brief the headhunters, I'm looking for a senior executive. I want an equal number of women on the shortlist as men. When you interview for the position, you have an equal number of women on the interviewing panel as men. Why? Because if you only have men, they select in their own ilk. If you have a balance, then you give the opportunity for the best person to actually come through rather than the man. And finally, at phase 2, you have to get the unspoken and hidden biases out on the table. And so let me give you an indication of what some of the hidden biases are. At Westpac, we did a survey of all 38,000 employees. We got about 35,000 responses, so it was great. They were all anonymous, so we were able to divide them into men and women. Here's what the men said. Let me start with the women said that there is a problem with gender diversity in the organization. The men said there isn't. Now, the first problem you have is men don't believe there's a problem. Now, not every man, but the majority of men. Women said that there were significant barriers to promotion, and the most significant barrier was at the family formation age. When women left to have families, that disrupted their career, and they never recovered from it. It was like getting off the treadmill. You can't get back on the treadmill where you were before, and the men got on. The men didn't believe that was the case and actually felt that women used it as an excuse. The women said that if they raised issues like salary, what time we have our first meeting in the morning, why do we have to meet at 8? I've got to get the kids to play school and so forth. When they raised it, that they were seen as, and this is the word they used, whinging bitches. This is what the men actually said. They're whinging bitches. So now, the problem is that these issues never get discussed because they're internalized. And until we get them out on the table and say, this is unacceptable, and people who actually think that don't deserve to be in the organization. And then the third thing is you start appointing people who are inclusive leaders and who are committed to targets like 50% representation. You weed out the entrenched biases, so the people who are who do have these stereotypes have no place in the organization, and you take flexibility from being marginal to mainstream, and actually a competitive advantage for your organization. And let me tell you why it's a competitive advantage, or will be. Not just that you're now fishing in 100% of the talent pool, but the companies who are on the Male Champions of Change program have said they will move to a position where they won't deal with suppliers who do not have a diversity program. They will not deal with them. So all of a sudden, if you want to be on the Combank's roster, you've actually got to have a diversity program. So it's gone from being a nice to do to a business imperative. So what are the 7 key success factors? Well, the first is you have to make the business case. I feel embarrassed that this is the 21st century, and we're even having to argue why there's a business case. But McKinsey did a study around the world, and diverse companies had a higher return on equity, 10% higher. They had a 48% larger earnings before interest and tax, and their stock price growth was significantly faster than those industry averages. So that's the business case, and there are plenty of great examples in corporate Australia where diverse companies actually are performing better. So I'm almost embarrassed that we have to make the business case, but some people, that's their start point. It's good for business, therefore we'll get on the program. The second thing is diverse companies have higher engagement scores, so people actually are motivated there, which means they have lower turnover, which means they're more productive. And if they're more productive with higher engagement, they have higher customer satisfaction scores. And if they have higher customer satisfaction, they have higher sales and profits. It's the virtuous cycle, and I can also show you the converse, which is the vicious cycle, where those companies that don't have diversity have lower engagement, higher turnover, less productive, and so forth and so forth. So the third thing is we have to remove the barriers, and this is the Bain survey that we shared with you earlier, and the most significant thing is here, where women say, look, it's almost impossible for me to have a family and to work as well. The interesting thing is the male champions have changed. The companies there are challenging that premise. So, for example, Woolworths have said that up until recently, you couldn't job share and run a supermarket. Well, actually, they've demonstrated that that's not the case, so they have job sharing in supermarkets. So I can give you a small example. I had a secretary at Lion Nathan who worked for me for 8 years. She then took 9 years off to recover from that experience and had a family, and so she's now decided to come back to work. But she's got 3 kids. So the deal we have is we've set her up at home, so she's got a computer and she's on the system at home, so she can work from home. She never starts before 10 o'clock because she has to get her kids to school, and she finishes at 2 because she picks her kids up from school, and she works 3 days a week, and it's totally flexible. And it works for her, and it works for me, and so all her friends are saying, how do you get a job like that? And I say, well, you work for one of the male champions of change companies. So that's the first thing we have to do, and we have to address it. No point in saying it's too hard. It's not too hard if you have a mindset. So, for example, at Westpac, the women there said, why do we have to have meetings starting at 8 o'clock? It's impossible for us to get the kids to school or to play school or whatever and have a meeting at 8 o'clock. So the head of retail bank then said, okay, that's fine. We will no longer have meetings at 8 o'clock. That's an even better solution. But that's something that the businesses can't solve. That's something you have to solve. The other thing in removing the barriers is, this is the major problem here, men appoint in their own style, which is why you have to get rid of the bias in the interviewing process. You have to get rid of the bias when you brief the search firms, because we'll end up with the same old, same old. We also have to confront the stereotypes. So how many times have I heard this? The reason why women are not getting on is because there are not enough women. Last time I checked the population statistics, that wasn't the case, but I've heard that. Then there's the penalties. Women actually want to be mothers rather than being executives. Oh, here's a great one. And this is from the financial services industry. These are comments that people actually made. This is not us making it up. I mean, it's incredible. Women lack ambition. I haven't found any woman that lacks ambition. Sometimes they just get fed up with the system. Targets, we shouldn't set targets because they're self-defeating. And oh, by the way, if we set targets, we'll just fail. So let's not set targets. That is just a cop-out. Oh yeah, here's another one. Women are less competitive. Yeah. Tell that to my wife. Workplaces should be meritocracies. Well, they are meritocracies. But what we're trying to do is get rid of the biases in the meritocracies so that meritocracy can actually flourish. I sat on the board of Westpac, and there are 3 women on the board, and so I thought it'd be really contentious one night over dinner, and I said, okay, ladies, how are we going to change the numbers? Should we set quotas? And 2 of the women said, absolutely not, because if you set a quota, it's not meritocratic. Women will get the jobs because they have to fulfill the quota numbers, and then the women will forever be feeling, I didn't get the job on merit, I got it because I was a quota. One of the women, a senior woman in corporate Australia, said, no, we're making no progress, we have to go to quotas. And the danger is, unless we do make progress, then it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We will be forced to go to quotas, and then the women in the room will be forever asking themselves, did I get it on merit? And that's not a position you want to be in. And then here's the next cop-out. The pay gap is caused by functional choice. And what's meant by that is all the women go into the soft jobs, HR. Pardon me if there's any HR people here, but this is not my definition. They go into the soft jobs. The men go into the real jobs, like finance or engineering. And guess what? Where do the CEOs come from? They come from the line jobs, not the staff jobs. So the pay gap's caused, and the lack of promotions caused by women choosing to opt out and go for the soft options. Well, that's not the case either, but that's some of the biases that we're confronting. Flexibility, we've got the language is important, and the language actually reflects attitudes, and we've got to change both attitudes and language. Making the case for women to be both mothers and executives is not special treatment. We've got to build it into our business strategies, so it's not a set of arrangements. So, and one of the things I think this industry is wrestling with is that they constantly tell me, well, our clients demand 24/7. And I think that the reason why you're in a situation like that is you've allowed your clients to get away with it. And for those companies who are now on the male champions of change, there has to be an explicit top-to-top conversation that if we want to build diversity, we have to have different arrangements. You can't call us on a Friday evening at 8 o'clock and expect us to do the work if we're going to build diversity into our culture. Unfortunately, I suspect that the only way to do it is top to top, because the junior executives down in the organizations actually see it as a power issue, that they can call you up at 8 o'clock and expect, on a Friday night, and expect the work to be done. We need to get clear on what flexibility looks like, and at the moment, the definition of flexibility is what employees are actually asking for, as opposed to employers making it a statement of why they're a better organization to work for. In other words, they build flexibility into their whole employee proposition. You should join us because we do the following. And graduates coming out of universities now are actually asking the question, so what are your green credentials? What is your diversity program? What are your flexibility rules? It should be available to all regardless of job, hence at Origin why I've said, look, if I have a secretary, it doesn't matter whether she's a secretary or not, you've got to start demonstrating flexibility at all levels. Another interesting story I tell is I have a very nice office at Origin, the chairman's office looking out over the harbour. The first day I was there, I got my teapot and my tea, and I got up to walk out to make some tea. 3 women jumped up and said, can we make you tea? And I went, no. And they went, no, we'd like to make you tea. And I said, no. making tea is not a woman's job. I can make tea. I know how to boil a kettle. I know how to put tea in the teapot. And they said, oh, no, 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 we'll do that. I said, no, no, we have to get rid of the stereotypes here. I make my own tea. Your job is not making tea. Now, I can tell you a worse story, which is I was sitting in a board meeting in one of the companies I sit on, and one of the board directors turned around to the company secretary, who's got 3 degrees, and said, could you get me a coffee? She got up and got him a coffee. I said to her at the end of the meeting, Helen, you're the company secretary. You don't do coffee. The next time someone asks you for a cup of coffee, just say to them, get your own friggin' coffee. And then finally, to get flexibility, we've got to start measuring the impact. Sponsorship. So we talk a lot about mentoring. So mentoring is psychosocial. How are you? What's on your mind? How's your day been? What are your problems? Oh, really? So there's a role for mentoring, but sponsorship is actually different. And I'd say to you that high potential women, and that's all the women I know, are over-mentored. How are you today, Margaret? And under-sponsored. The sponsor must be a senior person with clout, and they have to act as an advocate and actually act as a shield as well. And the most important thing is sponsors have accountabilities as well. They are accountable. If I'm your sponsor, then my accountability is, do I get you into a job? Not, do we spend once a month having a cup of coffee, finding out how you are and how your social life is and where you're traveling and stuff like that. All the women who've got to the top in corporate Australia have had sponsors, and they'll tell you, sponsors took a chance on me, sponsors promoted me, sponsors actually spoke up and said, you should actually see this woman. So finally, the invocation to, so these are all the things that I'm committed to doing, the Male Champions of Change are committed to doing, and the reason why I'm helping this industry is because Margaret asked me. And I'd be delighted to see changes in this industry, but this is not the only industry that needs changing, by the way. You talk to the legal profession. The one thing I would ask you to do is, when you see the unconscious bias being reflected, call it out. You can't walk past it. You can't let it happen. You actually have to have the courage to call it out, because if you don't call it out, it'll just perpetuate. And it's there, and there are double standards, and there's the inappropriate language, there's the inappropriate screensavers, there's the stuff on the credenzas that shouldn't be there. You've got to call it out. Now that's the more overt stuff, but there's the other stuff as well. So I sponsor a lady who works in a management consulting firm. She's a mother. She can't go to the gym first thing in the morning because she takes her kids to school as opposed to her husband. And then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she packs her bags and goes to the gym. And she says every time she does that, she feels guilty. And the men make comments like, sloping off for an early afternoon again, are we? And she said, it got to the stage where I felt embarrassed to go to the gym, so I stopped going. And that's the kind of stuff that we have to call out. So thank you very much for your attention, and good luck.
And Gordon, thank you very, very much for sharing the Male Champions of Change. I mean, the rich information, knowledge, and also experience that you have. It's invaluable, I think, for us to learn from others. And thank you also for, I thought it was volunteering to sponsor our industry, but thank you very much for providing kind of your guidance and also coaching to our industry leaders as well. One of the key initiatives that we had was to form our own kind of industry champions group. And these are our industry leaders who not only talk the talk, but also now walking the walk. And some of them will be joining us on the panel today to discuss the process that they have undertaken in their own agencies and the journey that they're on to transform their own agencies. So I'd like to introduce Lorraine Djokovic, who is one of our founding gender diversity group members and CEO of the Loud Agency, to lead our panel.
Well, thank you very much, the panel members. Gordon, that was sensational. Thank you for sharing that with us. John Steven from Group M and Sadiq Gohil from Droga 5, all esteemed leaders in our own industry, obviously with the exception of Gordon, but thank you and welcome anyway. He's still an esteemed leader. But I just want to kick off, and Gordon's actually addressed this. So I know there were some questions, and it comes up often. I mean, we're talking about gender diversity, and obviously the benefit that that's going to bring to females within the industry, and also promoting leadership within that gender. So some of the questions that we have, and we often face, is why then are we talking to three blokes? And I think Gordon successfully answered that actually in his presentation. So what has been pointed out is there's an increasing focus on the subject of gender diversity within our industry recently. Lots of conversation within our trade media, which has been encouraged and has been wonderful. But we're now past that point of discussion and we're looking to the point of action. So I really wanted to ask each and every one of you, what was your, and we might start with Gordon, but what was your impetus for change? What was the stimulus for you?
Very straightforward. I've got a wife and a daughter.
That was your motivation? Yeah, okay. John?
I think actually Gordon's statement to the council about the only people that actually can make the change are men.
Yeah.
And I want to be part
One of
that.
those that make change. No,
Yeah.
Congratulations. Sadiq?
A little bit the same as these guys, but I mean, the first thing that struck me is it just doesn't seem fair, a lot of the compromises that I see my female colleagues making. And then from an industry perspective, I think that, you know, when Gordon spoke to us originally, he talked about the stupidity curve, and you just kind of go, that's absolutely right. You know, like, why would we not try to address that issue?
Yeah.
And also the fact that I've got a 5-year-old daughter and a wife that works as well, so, you know,
You
she's
see
very
those
little,
challenges.
but I can imagine what it will be like in the future if we don't do something.
Yeah. So, Gordon, I might address this one to you. There's the notion, and you may have actually alluded to it before, but not with this term, the supplier multiplier. What is that?
The notion that if, let's take Westpac, says to its suppliers you have to have a diversity program, and all of its suppliers, in order to be on the panel, have diversity programs, then what you do is you get a wave effect.
Yeah.
Where diversity doesn't just happen in Westpac, but happens to all the companies that are aligned to Westpac. And not only that, but the companies that don't have diversity programs then go, well, I better get on the game, otherwise I'll never...
I'll lose this business.
I'll lose the business. All of a sudden it becomes real.
How progressed is that?
I think pretty, in an informal way, pretty well progressed, but the notion is that it'll go from informal to formal.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement to the advertising industry is before it goes to formal, get on the program.
I don't think it's as good as it could be on the client side, because I can only actually recall one tender document, RFP, that we've been asked to fill out, where it asked about our diversity
Policies.
situation within our group. So I think it needs more stirring up in the corporate world than it currently is at the moment.
Was that, without obviously revealing the details, was
Mm-hmm.
that a private organisation? Was it government?
No, it was a private organisation.
Interesting. Okay, that's good. Well, it's one seeping through anyway. Okay. How do you actually think that will impact our industry? Do you think we'll be fast to move on that sort of thing?
Me?
Yeah. do you think
Absolutely. I
so?
mean, I think we have to be, right? I mean, I think we've been, whether we like it or not, you know, we've been fast to move on other policy pieces, whether we're talking about government tenders and stuff like that, or private business.
Yeah.
You know, if our clients believe in something and they think it's important, at the very least, we have to pretend that we think it's important. But better than that, actually, you know, we can kind of help multiply the effect, actually make it, you know, part of society.
Yeah.
Make it part of culture.
Okay. Thanks.
On the media agency side, I'm not saying it's as good as it should be, but I think we're in a better position as a business than our colleagues in the creative side of the business. Look at our group, Group M. Of the business leaders, as in leaders of client businesses, up 45% of people within our organisation are women. Now that's still not acceptable to me, and there's room for improvement. But we are looking at ways of improving it by setting up the Diversity Council to ensure we get to that magic 50%.
Good. I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a moment.
Yeah.
I just want to draw your attention to some of the research that Alex alluded to in her presentation. We've got a number that came up which, regardless of the people on the panel or the working group who are predominantly female, and it said that 74% of women claim to have ever been treated differently by their male colleagues. And the majority of that treatment, the numbers that stack up really behind that, the largest by far were they received crude and sexist remarks, references to my appearance. And the second was not valued, lack of respect, less appreciated, less taken seriously. Now, I know that's not necessarily exclusive to our industry, but Gordon, I just wondered how that stacks up with other industries and where we sit as a benchmark. Okay.
So the question I would have is, to John's point, have we progressed?
Well, from my perspective, it's absolutely not tolerated in our company.
Yeah.
We have a number of programs we have in place that cover things like racism, bullying, sexual harassment, etc. And those programs are done to all the staff on a regular basis in small groups, so they understand the policy of the business. And if anyone contravenes any of those bits within our organisation, they are shown the door.
Okay. It's fine. Looking at me as if you're going to answer that one. I just want to talk to Gordon for a moment about the Male Champions of Change. You've got some really powerful organisations and leaders involved, specifically people like David Thodey, Alan Joyce, etc. And I'm assuming that obviously there's organisational benefits that they're wanting to achieve. But have you got any anecdotes in terms of any personal takeouts that these guys have, any learnings that they've had, any things that have surprised you along the way?
The thing that's surprised me on the upside is how quickly they have embraced this program.
Yeah.
And they actually buy the business benefits. And if you look at the performance of some of these companies, they're outperforming their peers. Secondly, they're actually prepared to stand up and be counted.
Yeah.
So I think they're demonstrating true leadership, which is saying, this is now personal, I'm going to make it a target, I'm going to publish this target, and I'm going to own it.
Great, that's excellent, thank you. You've taken us through the steps during the course of your presentation, but one of the things I think that's going to be interesting for the agencies who are represented here and the ones that aren't necessarily, but will undertake these programs is, what sort of period of time can we expect this program to take?
I think this is the most difficult issue of all. Because what we're talking about here is we're talking about culture change. And culture change does not take place quickly. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the danger is that a number of you will believe that this is a program. It's a program you get on. I'm not being critical here because this is what we're seeing elsewhere. It's a program you get on. After 12 to 24 months, the program's complete and you move on to something else.
Yep.
And the problem is that it won't be resolved in 12 to 24 months. This is a 5 to 10 year marathon. And the danger is that we declare victory too quickly. So after 2 years, the danger is we get fatigue, culture fatigue, and it becomes too hard. And after 3 or 4 years, we drop out because it's just too hard. And then the final danger is we're not making the changes that we expected fast enough, and therefore we have unrealistic expectations and we get frustrated. Just the simple maths tell you that if you start with 30% female senior executives, to get to 50 takes 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've got two gentlemen on the panel who are our own industry champions who are undertaking this program within their own organisations. So, Sadiq, I might actually start with you. The first step of the process is actually to do a self-evaluation. Has this thrown up anything interesting in your organisation?
Well, I mean, we all got together from a board perspective to talk about it, and I think one of the interesting differences was we actually start off reasonably even, because in doing the analysis we looked at, you know, who comes into the agency and then how does that kind of develop over time. And I think the thing for us was, it's quite confronting when you sit there and you realise that there is, you know, you kind of look at that stupidity curve and you go, well, that's not going to happen to us because we're not that kind of company. But the reality of it is you look at it and you go, actually, that does happen. And then as we got into the analysis piece to understand why people were leaving and all the rest of it, it was actually, like I said, it was quite confronting. But also, I think, importantly, quite empowering for us as a management team as well, because you know, once you actually sit there and you look at the problem and you break the problem into little pieces, you can actually think about how you might solve for a lot of that stuff. Yeah, which I think, so it's been good, just, you know, going through the process and having some rigour around it, even if it's difficult to start off with.
Yeah, John, for you?
Regarding myself
No,
or the business?
Yeah, for the business. Were there any areas that did you come into it with some assumptions, and were there any areas that surprised you?
I think there's still a boys' club mentality that exists in the business, despite the fact of our numbers.
Yep.
I think some good examples of that is golf. You never actually ask a woman if she'd like to play. And so now, when we're invited to golf, if there are any ladies that play golf within our organisation, I invite them. The rugby is another good one. I've got a box at the Bledisloe Cup. And I've made it a point that the CEO's invited, but so are their partners and our client partners as well. So it's about having the right balance in my mind.
Okay.
But there still is that blokey thing that exists within our business, there's no question about it. And that's something that we just got to continue to work on and get around.
What about your own leadership style and the shadow that your leadership casts over the business? How's that changed? Or how will that change?
I'm not sure it's changed that much because I'm always a great believer that there should be a balance within the organisation.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the years that I've been in the business, which have been long, I've had a lot of women that have been my right hand, and have been also my mentor within the business.
Okay.
You know, actually, there's been a change for me, which has been interesting. Since we've been involved in this program, one of the things, I think Gordon may have said it in one of our early meetings, was, you know, you've got to lead by example. And so it's one thing to say we embrace a flexible work arrangement. In fact, I think David Thodey talked about this at one of the larger conferences, and he talked about the fact that it's one thing for an organisation to say you should be flexible, and we've always, from the very beginning of our agency, we've always said we want a really flexible work environment. You know, you don't need to be at your desk and all that kind of stuff. And we tried, you know, effectively, I think in retrospect, give lip service to particularly female employees to go, you know, you should run your life as we totally support it. But until you actually have someone within the organisation that's doing that, it's very difficult to actually make that happen, right? So I now leave at 4 o'clock on Tuesdays and go and pick up the kids. And I don't come in till 10 on Wednesdays and Thursdays because I drop the kids off. And that happens every single week. So I don't do meetings on Tuesday afternoons and I don't do meetings on Wednesday and Thursday mornings. And, you know, that's just, and I think it's important. Like, you know, I never really thought that it would make, you know, kind of like, as long as I'm empowering someone else to do it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think a big part of the empowerment process is actually to lead by example. And I think, you know, that's been important. And as you can imagine, it's not easy to do. But I think it's really that's made a big difference to our organisation.
Yep. And your kids dropping them off too.
Yeah.
I'm sure that makes a big difference to them. Oh, it's exciting for them.
I think to that point, the flexibility, it should be across both genders.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. In fact, one of the guys in one of the agencies who's the head of strategy works 3 days a week and his wife works 2 days a week. So they share the responsibility of bringing up their family.
Yep.
But, you know, I think it needs to be both ways.
Yep. If I can stay with you two for a moment, Mike Conahan, who's also one of the industry champions, has a publicly stated target of 50-50 by 2020, which is lovely. What's your key targets? Do you want to share with us? Can you share with us? Have you got stated targets?
I don't have a. Well, yeah, we've agreed to 50-50 as well. I'm not sure what year we said we were going to do it. I think we were trying to get it faster than that though. So I can't, just to beat Mike really, but I think we said 2019 or something like that.
That sounds good to me. How are you tracking?
Actually, pretty good. Actually, we've made a significant difference in the way that we actually recruit.
Yep.
And we're getting there. I mean,
What changes have you made? How have you made those changes?
Well,
through
the interview process for one.
Yep.
I think we actually are way more. To be fair, it's actually just the part of the process is just to be more rigorous in the way that we actually interview. But in doing that, actually thinking about the gender bias that people bring to the table.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been interesting. I mean, I'll say personally, when we first started on this conversation, and particularly around the Male Champions of Change, I do. When you first kind of hear the name of it, you kind of go, "That's a bit weird, isn't it?" And then after you read well, it sounds a bit weird, but when you actually read the work that the guys have done with some brilliant organisations, and you actually hear all the leaders talking about it, it's actually really inspiring. So you can do a lot worse than literally take the McKinsey report that's been done and go, okay, here are the 10 steps that we need to follow, and we're along that way. The first one is obviously the audit, so
Yep.
I think that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, that's great. John, how are you tracking? What are your targets?
Well, we're nearly
50-50
there.
2018?
No, no. We're at 45 now, so
Yep.
I'd like to think that we'll be at 50% by next year.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So
Congratulations.
plus 50%.
Could I just,
Please.
I was asked to fill in our target for the Origin Board for the Equal Opportunities Commission, and they gave us a template that we should aspire to, which is 40% men, 40% women, and 20% other.
Oh.
So I called them and I said, how do I determine another?
Other.
Yeah. And they said, if you want to have diversity in your organisation, that's the template. So I'm still struggling with this.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can't work that out either. I'm curious from an internal perspective how your organisations have responded. So we're talking about leadership, setting examples, etc. But how is that filtering through from a cultural point of view? And how's it been received by your staff?
I think it's a really good thing. I think it helps in recruiting people, because people understand that we take the issue seriously. On top of that, I also think it's critical in terms of retaining the best talent as well, which I think is really where the rub starts to happen. I mean, you could probably sell someone anything to get them into an agency, it's whether or not they stay. And I think that above and beyond that, I mean, we've been fortunate that we've never really. I mean, we're a young agency, right? So we don't have years of necessarily developing into a boys' club or any of that kind of stuff. But actually knowing from the very beginning that we never want it to be like that, I think it has an overall kind of lifting effect on the culture itself. When we talk about those kind of issues at a management level, across the agency and all that kind of stuff. So I think it actually lifts the entire organisation, as well as helping both getting people in and stopping them leaving.
John, being an older organisation, have you seen any cultural shifts? Have you had any responses through the line from your group?
No, I think everyone's sort of accepted, what we want to achieve as a business. We've setting up the Diversity Council, but we've also set up an NGen EXCO, Next Generation EXCO, which comprises of 12 equally balanced men and women on the under 30s, and I've also tasked them with to come back to the ageing EXCO with a view on how we can better address what we're doing at the moment in gender equality.
Okay, that's fantastic. I just want to touch on our clients. I mean, we've talked about what's happening with the Male Champions of Change and their expectation that organisations that they deal with have diversity policies and practices in place. But in addition to that, have you seen, other than obviously the RFP that you referenced before, have you seen that sort of thing come through with your clients that you're working with, either of you? Any demands, any discussions at this point in time?
Not explicitly.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's a lot of support. I mean, if you take an organisation like Telstra who we work with, or Qantas, I mean, culturally they're very much there in terms of enabling flexibility and all that kind of stuff. To be honest, it hasn't really kind of filtered down to us from a from a service level agreement type conversation. But I think you definitely get the sense that there's, for example, we don't get calls from our clients at 11 o'clock at night going, you've got to get this ready at 8 in the morning.
Yeah, we need it Monday.
So, that I think there is I would imagine it starts with the soft cultural stuff and then it gets to the more rigorous numbers and data.
Yep.
Could I just make an observation on that?
Please.
One of the service companies that I work with was pitching for a piece of business with one of the male champions of change companies, and they had prepared a presentation about this thick. So I encouraged the leader who was going along. I said to him, put the presentation aside. The first dialogue you should have is about your values and how the values that you're inculcating, of which this is one of the major values, actually aligns with the values of the company that you're pitching for. The CEO of the company said at the end of the half-hour conversation, he said, this is unique in my experience. I've never had an organisation come in and talk first of all about their values. And he said, the great thing is that we're aligned on the values, so actually the presentation's irrelevant.
That's
And I think that's a conversation that we're trying to encourage. So before it gets to the RFP or before it gets to the contract, are we aligned from a values point of view?
Yeah, that's lovely. And finally, we're going to throw open to the floor for any questions, but I just, we may have touched on this with reference to what motivated you to get into this, but what do you personally want to achieve through this at the end of the program? Or not that it's an end program, but with the introduction of the successful program. John?
Equality, balance and flexibility.
Sadiq?
I'd hope that we build something that, we leave a legacy for our industry, that it's seen to be, a great place for both guys and girls to work, right? And has a reputation as being like that. I think, when we look at all of the other industries, even as a starting point, I think we're in a better place than, banking and some of the other places. However, I'd like it to be, from an industry perspective and also from an agency perspective, I'd like us, to be in a position where people go, well, we should be like that. I think that would be what success looks like.
Good.
My wife is much smarter than me, but she had to give up her career because she didn't have the flexibility in her career that we're trying to develop. And so now, when we go to dinner parties, she'll be sitting next to someone, a man, and they'll say, oh, yeah, what do you do? And she'll go, I'm a housewife. And they'll immediately turn and talk to the person next to them. She feels quite demeaned by this because of circumstances.
Okay, what we might do is throw open to the floor. Has anyone got any questions they would like to ask? Lady at the back.
My question, I'm new to this industry. I'm from HR. And my question, apologies. But my question is, and I don't think it's unique to this industry, but I was really interested to sort of see an article recently that sort of was role modelling a senior lady in this industry. And she described her day, and basically she started at 4, worked till 7, did a couple of things, went to work 9 to 5, went home, did a few things, and then logged on again for 3 hours. So she basically described like a 70-hour week. And for me, I'm really interested in flexibility policies, just sending work home, and whether you have any suggestions for how you can make sure that there's reasonable expectations set for both men and women about the way that they do the work.
Who would like to take that question?
Well, I reckon that's unacceptable, frankly. So I don't know who it was. It wasn't one of our people, was it?
Don't look at me.
No, you just looked at me. I thought, was it Katie? No, I think that's unacceptable. I don't think people working those sort of hours, you're going to get the right product return, because I think it just can't function like that. So that person needs to really look at what he or she is doing and the work that she or he is given.
I think flexibility is a two-way street, right? I mean, I do think it is as much about the organisation as it is about the individual. My wife works 4 days a week, and she doesn't work in advertising, but she does work in the service industry. And her employer kind of started to take the piss a little bit. She doesn't work on Fridays, and I'm like, you do more stuff on Fridays than I do. And we had a conversation about it, and ultimately she went back to her boss and said, look, you do know I only work 4 days a week. And immediately they were like, you know what, we're really sorry, you're right. And it's, I think it has to work two ways. One, you've got to kind of push back. And the other is, I think from an employer perspective, you have to respect the fact that this person, you're only paying them for 4 days. They should only have to do 4 days worth of work or whatever it is.
I think if I can, I might answer even though I'm not on the panel. But I have a woman in our office who we've negotiated. She has a young child. She's come back working 4 days a week, and I find at the moment myself coaching her not to work on Friday. That is her day off. It's the time that she's negotiated. We're not paying her to do that. I don't have those expectations, but the demands she's putting on herself at the moment, and that's because she came in having worked previously, obviously, without a child in our industry, and the demands are huge in terms of hours. So it's actually locking her down into the right behaviours as well, and making sure that everybody else in the organisation is educated to that same thing.
I think we have to be clear on this, what we're measuring.
That's right.
And we have to measure outputs, not inputs. And if we continue to measure inputs, then we'll never make the change. So, for example, my daughter worked in London for a bank in London, and her boss, who was a woman, said to her after 3 months, Debbie, I'd like you to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning. And Debbie said, is there a problem with my work? She said, no, your work's of the highest standard, but I'd like you here at 8 in the morning. So Debbie said, look, I'm a night person, so I can't get up early, and I live an hour away, so I can't get in for 8 o'clock. Can I have some flexibility? The answer was no. So Debbie, well, why do I have to be here at 8 in the morning? And the answer was, because I want you to be here at 8 in the morning. Now, if we continue to measure face time or hours worked or presence in the office or whatever, we'll never make the change unless we start measuring, okay, what are the outputs, and are the outputs the right outputs?
Thanks for today, by the way. It's very, very interesting. Sort of an observation leading to a question. I think when you talk about the really big corporates in Australia that you named earlier, I think their control mechanisms, if you will, or the pathways through which they can set and determine policy are very good, generally. Agencies are much smaller businesses. Even the biggest agencies in Australia would be lucky to have more than, 300 people or 400 people in them. And it's harder in agencies, in my experience, to set a policy and actually make it happen in real life. So the question is, we've got, I think one of the benefits of our industry, and I do think we need to decide what sort of industry we want to have, but one of the benefits of our industry is a relatively young workforce. So what sort of, the limitation is the control mechanisms might not be as strong, but the benefit, the counter benefit could be we have more millennials and younger people under 30 coming through our businesses. Can we get a bounce in terms of pushing this forward through the attitudes and behaviours they would naturally bring to our sector and to our businesses?
Who would like to pick that one up from the panel?
I think there's an interesting observation I'd like to make here. I remember when I was at Lion Nathan, and I said, look, we have to change. And so everyone said, yeah, the organisation needs to change. I said, no, the organisation doesn't need to change. You need to change. Because the organisation is just the sum of every individual who's sitting in the room. And unless you're prepared to change, the organisation won't change. So there's no point in talking about something that's objective and amorphous. It has to come down to each and every person in the organisation. And that, I think, is the challenge. When you go back to your workplaces, it's not whether your agency needs to change, Matthew. It's a question of whether you're prepared to change, and each of the individuals you address is prepared to change as well. and then it just becomes like a snowball coming down a mountain.
I think, I agree, although I do agree with Matt's point, right? I mean, I think a lot of the young people in our office, there's this whole, across the board, male, female, doesn't really matter, I think are much better at working smarter and not necessarily working hard. Like, the best people in our place don't get there at 7 and they're not there at 7 in the evening, but they produce way more and they're younger and they're faster and all the rest of it. I actually think it is a really good thing culturally to encourage that type of behaviour at a kind of high level. But I think that the important thing is, I think young people start to unlearn those behaviours really quickly, right? So I think, to your question, I think we need to, from a leadership perspective, we need to lead by example so that is encouraged. And then I think that a lot of the issues around, flexibility and gender and all those things will hopefully, start to dissipate a little bit. Because I can't imagine that, people that are coming into the workforce now would stand for it in the way. I mean, because I just think about the massive shifts in just other behaviours around the workplace. I'd hope that we'd see a similar shift in some of the things that we're talking about this morning.
Yeah, I think, lead by example. What I do, because we've got a lot, probably the mean age is 29 within our organisation, and I bumped that up because of my age. So it's probably less if you take me out of the equation. But I have every 6 weeks, 2 months, I meet with all the new starters in the organisation and talk to them about what my expectations are as a leader and what my expectations are of them in the business, and talk to them about what the opportunities are in the business, what the flexibilities that we have within the business, so they feel they're comfortable about their working environment and flexibility within the organisation.
Hi, thank you for this morning. It's been really insightful. I'm prepared to go back out and change the world from what you've said. I think sometimes it's not just looking at people that you are responsible for, but there are always someone else who is a manager above you. And when I look up the chain, there's CEOs and chairmen and regional people who aren't sitting here today and perhaps haven't had the same insights that we've had. So what can you suggest to us where we have to educate above in order to truly make change?
Up to you.
Actually, I think Gordon might be the best to
I
address
think
that
so,
right
yes.
now, given his
I think you should send them the report, the Male Champions of Change report, as a starting point. I mean, it's really, I'm not just saying because Gordon's sitting here, but it's a really, really, whether or not you're interested in this as a topic or you think it's important or not, the way that it's been put together is so compelling that I would challenge any senior person in our industry to not read it and go, oh, actually, you know what, maybe I should reconsider. I mean, that's my opinion, but I mean, I found it really helpful, and I think it's a really good tool, and it's free. So I think that's a great starting point.
I think there's a couple of suggestions that I'd like to make. One is I go back to my final invocation, which is when you see bias, you have to be courageous enough to call it out and not walk past it. And the second thing is get a sponsor. And then if you're able to make the changes and have the courage to stand up and be counted, you'll find other people will congregate around you.
I was actually at a regional meeting the other week with all the managers from the group. And I sat in there and there was probably 28 people. And of those 28 people, there was one woman. And I got up and I said, this is a effing disgrace to our business, to the CEO for the region. I said, you really have to relook of our balance within the organisation, because this is not a good look. So you just got to stand up to them. Say what you think. I'm a great believer in saying what you think, and that's one of the things I say to every person that comes into our organisation. Say what you think. Don't say what they want to hear.
The male champions of change are committed to only sitting on panels with equal diversity. And so I have to apologise this morning.
One observation I'd make about our industry is that we need to not only champion change within ad agencies themselves, but from our clients as well, because they've got a set of expectations as well that we often have to adhere to. For example, job sharing is obviously something which is very attractive to women trying to re-enter the workforce after having children. Now, even though an ad agency might be okay with job sharing role, it's then convincing the client that they are going to be okay having two people servicing their business rather than one point of contact. Have you got any recommendations for what we can do with helping champion change with our clients?
Anyone want to take that one?
Yeah.
Go on.
No, go ahead, Jim.
It varies by client. So I think some clients are accepting towards it, some clients are resistant to it. How do you convince them? You convince them saying that you've got two great pieces of talent that work on your business, that work hand in hand. There will be no disruption whatsoever. It's a matter of laying out the foundation as to how it will work and how their business will not be disrupted as a consequence of it. And, we've got lots of people that work 2 or 3 days a week and someone else follows up behind that. But it's convincing the client, but some clients are more difficult than others in that respect. Ignorant is probably the word. Yeah.
I'd make two observations. One is, and this is something I've said already, is you have to have the explicit top-to-top dialogue about the values of the organisation. And the question you have to ask yourself is, if the client doesn't share those values, do you actually want to work with them? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, it goes back to, what are you measuring? Are you measuring the number of people who are working on it, or are you measuring the output? And if you're measuring the quality of the output, it shouldn't matter how many people are job sharing. And getting your clients aligned on the values and getting them aligned on the output can't come from the junior people in the organisation. It has to come from the top. And there has to be a commitment from the top that when things get difficult down in the ranks, that they're prepared to intervene to preserve the original agreement.
Thank you, guys. It's good that a lot of this morning has been common sense, and I think we're all nodding along. And in the corporate setting, there's a lot to work with. The place I see the most discrimination is around the kitchen table when you get the older generation involved. Particularly my mother, who grew up with very limited opportunities and has a very set mindset for how my wife should perform. If this discussion is going to get traction, I think the mothers of the mothers are great role models. Are we including them in the discussion, or what work's being done there?
Do you want me? I might even be able to pick up that with you. Look, I think this is clearly this is being championed, and we're talking at a corporate level. So we're talking about champions of change, and as Gordon said in his outset, this is important because men run the organisations, and they are the ones who can engender change. Yours is more a social discussion.
It has a very big impact on the workplace.
I agree.
We mentioned earlier, women mark themselves very hard. And I think when they're told repeatedly by the generation ahead of them that they should have a different role, it has a big impact.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, the only thing that we could probably respond to that with is that we are bringing through women. There are some role models, and it's role modelling that's really important for women to respond to. And it certainly came through in our research that one of the things that was a major influence for other women was actually to be able to see role models. And to work alongside them as well, and see how they practice their behaviours. But you're talking at a social and even a family level. So I guess each family is going to be different in terms of their priorities, and that's not necessarily something I think corporates can influence at all. Good question. You want to add? Margaret wants to add to that.
I think our society is changing, and within the families, fathers also want to take a much more active role in the family and raising children. So I think it works on both sides. I think it's a case for fathers as much as it is for mothers as well. So I think that's something that needs to then be discussed with the other generation, that society is changing. There are different needs and different roles as a result.
I think in the same way as you call it out at work, you have to call it out at home. So my mother-in-law, God rest her cotton socks, she said to my wife, you know, why would you bother going to university? Just become a secretary. Well, you have a responsibility then as a woman or as a man to basically say no.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you sincerely to all of our speakers. And I would also like to acknowledge the members of the Gender Diversity Group who've been championing this initiative. And our hope was that this forum would help either reframe or provide also new insights on gender diversity as a business imperative and also opportunity. And so to close, I'd actually also like to share just some upcoming industry initiatives that we'll be launching from the Communications Council in the coming months. In September, we'll be announcing a long-term partnership with the IPA, with the chair of the IPA, Ian Priest, coming down to Australia to join us for that occasion. So this partnership will enable us to share and leverage each other's best practice, and likewise embark on launching internationally certified professional development program. So in October, we'll be announcing the launch of both online and experiential IPA certified courses. So the IPA Foundation Certificate, for instance, will be consisting of 30 hours online learning and also a seated exam, will be established as a requirement for all persons entering our industry. So the courses will provide professional development, they'll be internationally recognized, and also established as a requirement for professional standards within our industry and career development. So we look forward to sharing those details with you in the coming months, and also encourage you to contact us if you have any queries on this. Okay, so that's all for today. Please, if you're interested in getting any more information, we've got the hub, the website hub that will be launched on this topic, pointing you to the different steps, the different phases, and also tools and resources. But if there's anything that you need help with, don't hesitate to call us at the Comms Council at any time. Okay? So thank you very much for your time today.